A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine. Thank you for joining us. And apologies, first of all, if you were tuned in on Thursday and you wondered, where's Dan? There's no show. My Thursday is bereft of my usual home of entertainment and wine diversion. Well, unfortunately, I'm afraid it all caught up a bit. Time at the Dunhill, time at Cape Wine, time at a wonderful auction I got to host down in Cape Town. And yeah, I actually just needed to catch my breath. So I'm afraid we didn't have a show Thursday, but gee, have we got many shows coming your way. I can tell you that over the next stretch, we're going to be having shows coming from Dubai, I think, at the moment. We're going to be broadcasting from the Chenin Blanc Congress down in Stellenbosch. That is coming up. This time next week, we'll be broadcasting from the Pinnacle Point Golf Club. Why on earth are we doing that? Well, you'll find out next Monday. There will be some great wine and some very interesting winemakers as part of that particular show. And coming up this Thursday, we're going to be celebrating the great Dame Pete Bailey, who left us earlier this year in person, but left behind a monumental legacy. And that legacy has been extended into a limited edition wine in celebration of one of the iconic figures of South African wine. And so Benny Howard, Michael Frijon, Michael van der Venter, amongst others, will be joining us to try out that wine, to pay tribute to Dame Pete Bailey. And in the case of Michael, look forward to next week, because WineX is almost upon us. Just as we're catching our breath from Cape Wine, it's gather everything together and off we go to the Sandton Convention Centre and Michael Frijon's grand celebration of South African wine. So it's a busy home straight for the wine world. It's a busy home straight for Dan Really Likes Wine. And it's a busy evening for us all, because ahead of this weekend, where there's another wine event, in this case a particularly cool one, the Pick and Pay Wine and Food Festival, I'm talking to a couple of winemakers who are part of that festival to celebrate the festival, celebrate what they've got on show there, but also to talk about some particular aspects of the wine worlds they inhabit respectively. Johan Reyneke is one of our guests. The other is Takuan von Arnim from Haute Cabrière, and both of them will be joining me in just a moment. Before we gather them in, though, and start talking about wine, let's have a look at some of the latest wine news. Well, this is the headline act of the wine news. In fact, I'm going to be talking about this a little bit later with Takuan and Johan, just to get their thoughts on some of the great wine they have tasted. This was an evening that Roland Peens, a good friend of the show, a regular guest there, and invited me to co-host with him, which I think was a rather grand term for sitting beside him and watching on as he poured extraordinary wine. I had very little to do with the mechanics of the evening, but a great deal to do with the celebration of it. This was the Dan and Roland Bordeaux charity dinner, wine that stems from a collection that belonged to an avid wine enthusiast who sadly departed earlier this year, leaving behind a remarkable wine collection that Roland has now been tasked with flogging. And part of the sale, which will happen over a number of auctions through Strauss, the first one of those being the first weekend of November, the opportunity to use some of that wine for charity. And so we had a charity dinner which raised more than R500,000. People did pay a fair premium to be part of the evening, but when you have a look at those wines, it is fairly easy to understand why. The wine of the night to open us up was some Champagne Krug, the 170th edition. They don't have a vintage on this, but they do tell you which particular accumulation it is, if that's the right term. There will be upwards of 30 different vintages that make up this particular cuvee, and that's the one we started with. From there, an opening salvo of some 2005 Angelus and 2005 Petrus and some 2000 Chateau Ozon. We had pouring wine for the night, just the general stuff that tops up your empty glass in between courses. That was some Chateau Margaux from 1996 and some Pavie from 2000. We had from 1989 some Haut-Briand and some Le Pin from 1982. The Cheval Blanc We also had some Lafite Rothschild, and wine of the night for me, the Chateau Latour 1982, which was just blindingly good. And then going all the way back, 1961, and some Chateau Lafite Rothschild. Chateau Lafite Rothschild was a little earlier. This was the Mouton Rothschild 61. And then 1959, La Mission Haute-Brion, still alive, still fresh, still vibrant, still refusing point blank to believe that it was 63 years old. Just a terrific celebration. And we finished off with a couple of vintages of Sauternes from the Chateau d'Yquem, the legendary sweet wine from 96 and 67. And both of them, at 67 in particular, just aging quite wonderfully and making for a brilliant night. If this is the kind of wine you like and you think you might be able to add to your cellar or collection, then look out on the 6th of November, the first of several auctions from which this particular collection will find its way into very lucky hands around South Africa and, I suspect, well beyond. What a night. Thank you very much to Roland Peens and his team. Then from Uwe Mirror, this is something to look out for. This happens Thursday, 27 October, so that's next week. If you're not up in Johannesburg at Winex and you're down in the Cape, the views from Uwe Mirror, as you can see from the image, are quite dramatic. It is an evening that for 500 Rand gets you wine and charcuterie for 2 people, and that's either their Singer Wing Sauvignon Blanc or that Mirror Cabernet Sauvignon. It's a beautiful valley for Cab. 2017 is a lovely vintage for that part of the world. I know where I would be headed, but it's up to you. You can head over to Dineplan or to Uwe Mirror if you would like to book an evening in the Helderberg and celebrate some charcuterie and wine on a beautiful evening. And then Winex next week, 26th to 28 October. It is the return of one of the iconic events of the South African wine industry. It is usually very, very full indeed, but don't let that put you off, because it's full of wine people as well as it is wine drinkers. And so there are plenty of stops you can make as you maneuver your way around the floor and meet the various producers, try their wine, and should you so wish, buy some to add to your collection. Well done to Michael Friedjon and team for getting it back, and we will be chatting to Michael about Winex on Thursday in between our tribute to Davey Bailey. So there we go. That's some news from the world of wine. I'm going to come back to those French wines in a moment, because I want to see what my 2 winemakers thought of both them and also some of the other great wine they've had in their respective careers. And I know there'll be plenty of it. But first of all, to check if they've caught their breath, because Cape Wine might have finished officially a week and a half ago. I think for some people, it's gone on just a little longer with international visitors having taken the chance to stay on in South Africa. So let me welcome our guests, see how they're doing. Johan Reyneke from Reyneke, Takuan von Arnim from Haute Cabrière. Gentlemen, welcome. Lovely to see you both.
Cheers, Dan. Cheers, thanks for having us.
And both, as usual, looking fresh and youthful and full of energy and raw athleticism, which is the hallmark of all young winemakers. But behind that happy, smiling veneer, Johan, has Cape Wine finally finished for you? Have you got rid of the last of the foreigners and put them on a bus home?
Dan, indeed. We had our last group until 4 p.m. this afternoon. It was wonderful. So we've had, since just before Cape Wine, I think about 18 days straight, Saturdays, Sundays included. It's great for us as a brand, but what they said today was that they were so happy with the experience in South Africa, with the quality of wines that they tasted, and in particular, they were impressed by how we stood together as a community and worked together, and everyone was proudly South African and proudly South African wine. So I think it was a fantastic showcase and a very good event for all of us.
I think, Johan, that's such a wonderful point that you pick up as your key takeaway, that unity. When I walked into Cape Wine on Wednesday morning, it was just a blast of energy and electricity and excitement. And I don't think that was just from all of the static electricity coming off Duncan Savage's blazer. It was just people who were so thrilled to be together and to be together supporting each other. And it's nothing new to the South African wine industry. I think by and large, it's a very unified field and people do tend to work together. But Cape Wine did seem to highlight that element and to really lift it and elevate it in the eyes of everybody who got to visit.
I think so. I think there's quite a buzz in South African wine, and there has actually been for a number of years now. Really amazing wines coming out of the industry, international audience, taking notice, VIP people flying from all over the world to come and see what we have to offer and being pleasantly surprised. So I think it's a very exciting time to be part of the industry. I think, these are days we'll remember for a long time yet to come. A very special time. Absolutely.
I'm going to come back to you on Cape Wine just a little later on, because a key theme of Cape Wine was sustainability. And as our king of local sustainability, I'm fascinated to see what you thought of how that was portrayed at Cape Wine and how much of an impact it had in real terms. But before we do that, let me nip over to the back end of the Franschhoek Valley. And the man who, I don't know if he remembers this, but he taught me how to sabrage with great inelegance. I did my first one under his guiding hand many years ago. Takuan, welcome back to the show. It was lovely to see you. We had a fleeting encounter at Cape Wine as you were being pursued by dozens of people wanting to try your wine. What were the 3 days like for you? And like Johan, did they extend well beyond just the simple 3 days of the expo?
Well, Dan, unfortunately, one hasn't left yet. We got a Swiss importer here. He's quite relentless, but no, it was really, really fantastic, and enjoyed the energy. I think South Africa has really achieved amazing amounts of regional different styles. That we're not all on top of each other. There are different characteristics, and maybe Duncan should send out a little memo beforehand and say, just take the darkest shades into this place, because even if the lights go off, you'll spot him from a mile away. But no, a lot of energy, a lot of positive feedback. And yes, part of sustainability is that we all support each other. We, one country, and if we sing one song about, because wine, what is wine? It's a form of art, but it classically brings people together. So if there's so many differences and there's separation, it doesn't work. So that was shown. It's like how we're coming together, we're focusing on wine, we're focusing and respecting our terroirs, which are different, and enjoying it. And there's a discussion about it. I've noticed you've got a substantial amount of Bordeaux wines that you went through. I was delighted. I'm a bit disappointed I wasn't invited to it, but when I spoke to a guy in Burgundy once, I said, have you been to Bordeaux? And he said, yes, but I prefer wine. So that's a little joke from my side. But the collaboration of the South African wine industry and what we've achieved through another, those 2 years, and not even going to talk about it, has been tough. And the respect we're getting is fantastic.
It's a really positive sentiment across the board out of Cape Wine. As I said in my wine magazine column, which was up today, it doesn't suddenly mean that South African wine is plain sailing. We're going to flog everything. We're top of the world. We've got nothing to worry about. There's still plenty of challenges, but a lot of those challenges will be met, I feel, by the inspiration that has come out of Cape Wine last week. You mentioned that wine, so let's have a chat about it. But because before we talk about your wines this weekend at the Pick and Pay Wine and Food Festival and some of the things happening at both of your wine estates, I loved sharing the wine I had on Saturday night with the world via social media, mostly because it was just really cool to do, but also because there was such interesting feedback from people who had some of that wine or tried different vintages or wanted to know more about it. And I'd love to get some of your thoughts on it, starting with the very first one we had for the evening on arrival, and that was Champagne Krug. You guys, through the Pierre Jourdan brand, Takuan, make some of South Africa's finer bubblies. We'll be seeing them at the festival this weekend. Tell me about the relationship between what you're making as Cap Classique and French Champagne, both in terms of the style, but also the inspiration you take from the wines of Champagne that you're channeling into your own particular interpretation in South Africa. Well,
Champagne, and I mentioned it briefly earlier about how South Africa is coming together. Champagne is not that easy. You've got a region with an amazing name, and if you were not creative, you'd just be another product with the same name, and then it would be a price question. So, my father always mentioned style distinguishes the famous houses of the Champagne, and Krug is what really renowned. I mean, if you think they're using 30 years of different base wines and what you call reserve wines, it's a true art. When Haute Cabrière, Pierre Jourdan started, we were already around 270 years behind Champagne, and the Cape Classique Association crunched numbers and said, okay, we'll leave the wines on lease for only 9 months. Subsequently, 50 years later, we can leave it longer, and we have to leave it longer because we just want to produce and proudly show wines that come from the Cape, and that's why we're focusing on Cape Classique and the region, and it's exciting. And I think the most important thing is to continue drinking, continue tasting. If you don't taste different wines, it's almost like taking a holiday. It's a sabbatical. Sabbatical sounds a bit harsh, but it's just refreshing and inspiring because, after 18 days or 2 weeks of entertaining, it really goes close to the bone. You get tired. And it's there we go. My cat's just arrived, so she might just walk past the screen. Her name is Whiskey. I seldom drink it. Joking. But it's all about inspiration and looking at these great brands and also creating your own wines and having a story about it. It's all about, being distinguished in style.
It's a wine that in Krug has, I think, inspired many people, not just Takuan, and allowed different interpretations of bubbles in different places. And we'll talk about the Pierre Jourdan in just a moment. What about you, Johan? We also, if I look at the second round of wine, we kicked off, again, 3 of the huge names, the Chateau Petrus, the Angelus, and then we also had some Ozon. I think I've got there we go. Those are the 3 that got us going for our first flight. Wines that you almost felt ever so slightly guilty drinking because they were so young. Now, in a South African context, something that's 22 years old, something that's 17 years old, generally we'd consider that to be a pretty good drinking window. Yet, such is the nature of the great first growths, the great Bordeaux wines, that this is wine that's still very much in its infancy, Johan.
Yeah. Dan, you're a lucky man. I can't believe it. I'm also kind of like Takuan, jealous. I wasn't invited. Some people spend a lifetime and do not get the opportunity to taste those amazing wines that you've just shared with us. I think they're amazing. I mean, they're examples of what the wine world can achieve. They've had a lot of practice. They come from great terroir. And they've certainly put in the hours to figure out, how their vineyards work and how to approach their winemaking style. Having said that, I think, South Africa is also going through a very interesting phase. In the past, well, when I started out, we were still selling grapes to the local cooperatives. And then, when Mandela was released and South Africans were free to travel the world and welcomed or given the opportunity to make wine in other countries, I think we were greatly influenced by them. If you taste a proper Bordeaux, like what you've shown us, or a nice Syrah from the north of Rhone, or, I don't know, Didier Dagenau's Selects, it changes how you think about wine and about specific cultivars. And I think as an industry, we then, in a way, try to emulate that. But we've gone beyond that. And the whole game now is to try and find out who we are and what makes South African wine great. And how do we go about achieving that and developing and finding our own identity, building on that. And I'm very positive about what the future holds. And I think just in terms of value, if you look at the quality of South African wine and how ridiculously cheap it still is on a global scale, it's a good time to be a drinker of South African wine for sure.
Again, you're making plenty of great points. And in fact, you talk about South African wine in this context. At the end of the night, when the international wine had run dry. The Bordeaux had been drunk. Every last sip was gone. Magnum of 2009, Gravel Hill got opened, and the other wines held sway, certainly, but the Gulf was not as seismic as some might imagine. It was a really, really good wine at the end of the night, and so it does add substance to Johan's suggestion of the good path that we are on. I want to ask you each a final question linked to Saturday night. If I look at the penultimate round of wine that we had on, well, actually not, but there was some desserts, but of the reds on Saturday, it was from 1982, Takuan. It was some Lafite Rothschild, it was some Latour, and then we also had some Cheval Blanc, and that Latour was the wine of the night. All three were sensational, but 40-year-old wine. This recalibrated my all-time top 10 wine. As somebody who I know will have drunk plenty of wine from all over the world, are there one or two for you, Takuan, that as you look back through the mists of wine drinking time, you go, gee, that was something pretty special?
Well, at least you're talking about mists and not purple haze. No, I've had some amazing wines. Looking at that Latache over there, or the Latour. There's been one or two occasions where I've had some big wines by chance. Somehow the von Arnim boys have always been kind of lucky. I remember two scenarios. One, working in Germany in Stuttgart, Württemberg, where they're very, very specific, and they really enjoy like a bulkier wine. What is a bulkier wine? You can get volume out of it. It's called Trollinger. And but fortunately for me, my boss had made quite a bit of. His father had made quite a bit of money, so he had traveled and had taken the big step out of Württemberg and Trollinger, and had made some cool friends. And one night we're going to a tasting, but after picking Trockenben Auslese, there was 8 guys in the vineyards the whole day, and we only got 20 liters. That's how amazing it is to produce great wines. I mean, the whole day, and you only get 20 liters because the berries are so dry, so concentrated. But he had an extra ticket to a champagne tasting, and no one was interested because they were so regional. So I said, "Yo," and he basically gave me a blazer and I think a pair of shoes, and the rest was mine. And we walked into this place, and the ladies were full of pearls and leathers. And we were there shortly, and then from there we left. And as we were going through Stuttgart, he noticed his friend's lights were on, and his friend happened to have married a very wealthy lady, only worth like 250 million euro. And they had this little quaint wine shop. We had exactly these wines that you've been tasting, and he said, "Let's pop in for a drink." His friend said, and then it was just after their honeymoon, so they hadn't seen each other for a long time. So he sat us down with 3 Riedel sommelier glasses, and he opened, and I must find the list, but there was definitely a Latour in there and some other top wines. He opened 5 bottles. He poured 5 bottles. Each one had 250 milliliters of the most amazing wines, that I'd ever tasted. And my boss says to me, "Takuan, why don't you drink faster? You might not afford to drink these wines in your life again," which I did find a bit of a pity. But I said, they're so good that if I only have to taste them once, I'm going to enjoy them slowly. And that's probably the slowest I've ever drunk. So that was the one story. I must really dig out the names, but it was top. And then my father-in-law, we had a dinner at his place. He's a big tax guy, lives in Germany, and he didn't know much about wines. He was only inspired and told what to buy. And he had this very simple fridge, like the simplest fridge you can imagine for wine. And he said, "Takuan, why don't we go and choose some wines, pull out any one, we drink it, but take 2. The first bottle I took out was a Latour 80. So I said, "Look," without trying to tell him how much it cost, "let's just take one to start off with." And we got up, we drank it, and then briefly afterwards, my wife's stepmother said, "So where's the second bottle?" I said, these wines are important. He said, no, just go and get a second one. So instead of going for the same vintage, same grow, I went for Amago. And it's quite amazing how aligned they are with quality and I wouldn't say restrictions, but rules and regulations. But you do pick up a difference of the cellar master's hand and the art of wine. It was amazing.
the kind of recollections that define our wine memories and nights like that. And sometimes you don't even know they're going to come along. And as with Takuan there, you suddenly get them sprung upon you. And gee, they make magical occasions. Let's finish off this wine indulgence by nipping back to Johan. The last two wines we had from the red section, which were oh so good, were the 1959 La Mission Haute Cabrière, which was still remarkably young and strong. And then next to it, that Mouton Rothschild from, it looks like a 4. It's actually a 1961 on the label there. And then afterwards, we had two very different, very lovely vintages of Decem, one from 96 and one from 67. That's 67 in particular, a real sort of tart narchy peel in and amongst the sweetness. Just such terrific celebrations of wine. Really turning my "these are the best wines I've ever had" list upside down. For you, Johan, in your wine drinking career, other than your own wine, of course, what have been the wines and the memories around them? Because it often is the occasion as much as the wine themselves that help to define it as a memory. What are the ones that stand out for you over the years?
Well, Dan, yeah, those wines certainly are superb that you're sharing there. I think for me, it kind of goes, it's obviously it's about quality, but it's also about wines that make me think. And more importantly, wines that make me question my belief system. And the two come to mind. I remember I was in Amsterdam, probably around about the year 2000. I can't remember the exact date. And somebody presented us with a bottle of Didier Dagenau's Silex. And it's got that Aculian hand axe on the bottle. And I tasted that wine, and admittedly prior to that, my exposure to Sauvignon Blanc was largely South African, with the odd Cloudy Bay or New World expression thereof. And I just could not believe that it was Sauvignon Blanc. I couldn't believe it. It was so different. That it was alive, and there was a vitality in the wine, and it was just so original. I'd never tasted a Sauvignon like that. And it really made me think about how we approach our Sauvignon Blanc on the farm and how we understand the grape. And I suppose the importance of not trying to follow a specific style or something that's popular in the market, but to take a step back and look at your vineyard and look at your soil, and kind of less becomes more, Stop trying to make a wine, but just try and capture the essence of the place. I mean, it sounds very like something that everybody would say, but that wine really made me think about what we were doing, especially in terms of Sauvignon Blanc. And another one that was very interesting was Nicolas Joly with his Coulis de Serrant, the biodynamic range in the Loire. That was actually a bit of a hard evening for me. I started in Copenhagen with our importer there at 3 p.m, and we had a 7-course meal, and all the wines were served blind through the course of the evening. And those Danes definitely know how to hold their drink. And at like 3 a.m, I had to get out of there, or I was going to die in that restaurant. And it was fascinating because there was this one white wine, Chenin Blanc, I know it was, that was kind of shy off the bat and a bit restrained. And I didn't blow my hair back. And it kind of, it definitely didn't catch my attention early on. But as the night progressed and the early hours of the next morning, it was like the sun was shining and this flower was opening. And I couldn't believe that specific wine. And that happened to be a biodynamic wine from the Loire. And I know the producer can sometimes be seen as a bit controversial, and some of his vintages are better and some are worse. But that specific wine blew my socks off. And it taught me two things. It showed me that I could also look at Chenin in a very different way, not necessarily sort of florally fruity Chenin, but much more serious. And also that you could make a very fine organic biodynamic wine that would have an incredible longevity, which was kind of counter to what people used to believe back in the day. So I think those two really made me think what we were doing and kind of change the course of our ship to a certain degree, I would say.
Dan, if I may just interrupt there, Sorry. So I fully agree. I fully agree with what Johan just said. Sometimes we taste wines and we give an opinion or we rush into it, but there are times where you just you need to let the wine just open up a little bit and breathe and express itself. They've been almost trapped in this vessel, sometimes stored in right and wrong conditions. But I think sometimes we do enjoy the wines too fast, and how they actually evolve, or the experience just takes it to a new level. It is alive. Wine is alive until the last drop is drunk. But I'd say to people as well, I always say, it's some of the wines are like a bit of a mind game, and then you must just respect that as well. I think sometimes we just want to live life too fast, and we forget how alive wines are.
I think that's a really important point to make, and the enjoyment of wine has to sit atop just about everything else. And you've got two winemakers here who really enjoy the wine and who've been inspired by some great wine to make their own great wine. You mentioned there, Johan, both Didier Dagenot, one of the greats, his daughter Charlotte now forms part of the South African wine scene. You also mentioned a biodynamic wine, and that speaks very much to the heart of Johan Reyneke and the wine philosophy that you've not only embraced yourself, but have spread the gospel of so enthusiastically through South Africa and beyond, which brings me back to Cape Wine and back to that discussion around sustainability. It's become, if not a problematic term, Johan, then I think one that has lost some of its impact and some of its meaning, because we toss it about very freely without often really stopping to think about what we're really trying to say when we talk about sustainable. What does that actually mean? Is it sustainable financially? Is it sustainable for the people involved? Sustainable for the winemaking process, for the ground from which that wine comes, from a combination thereof? What did you make of the sustainability messaging around Cape Wine, and how the international market who came to South Africa would have seen South Africa in that light?
Well, Dan, my personal take is that sustainability is a three-legged chair, and you must make sure that all legs are in place if you want the chair to not fall over eventually. I think we have to look after nature. We have to look after people, and we have to look after money. And that is how it works. And the reality is we can probably, exploit nature the longest and get away with it, people the second longest. But when the business runs out of money, things kind of grind to a halt pretty quickly. But by the same token, if you take a long-term view, you have to be sure that you tick all those boxes. And I think different people have different preferences, and different businesses and wineries have different things that come naturally to them. And I think at Cape Wine, there was quite a good expression of that. I saw people really getting into all things nature in terms of land caring and regenerative agriculture, but also land sparing and protecting biodiversity and that kind of thing. But there was also proper consideration given to people, the importance of looking after people, investing in people, seeing them as, literally the integral part or the foundation of the house on which our industry is built. And then there was some really interesting research done and feedback given by certain companies regarding the financial sustainability of the wine industry, future strategies to mitigate risks, and then so I thought it was well versed. I thought it was a great message for Cape Wine to get across. I think the industry did its homework. I don't think, depending on whose talk you attended, you would get sort of different nuance in terms of what was more or less important. But everybody seems to buy into this idea that for a wine to really be sustainable, you ultimately have to price in not just the bottom line, but also the ability to look after the natural environment where the grapes are produced, and also to look after the people involved in the process. And I think that message got through loud and clear. I think Cape Wine did a great job with that. What was also interesting was to look at the demographic of the customers. I've got a dad who turned 93 last Monday, and I've got a daughter who's 19 years old and one 15 years old, and I have completely different conversations with them. And my dad loves aspirational products and Mercedes-Benz and Pringle jerseys and these kind of things. And my daughters want to wear and support brands that are sustainable. If they break, you can fix them. And if you think where the wine market lies, I think it lies with the young people. They're the future of our industry. And we can produce stuff until we're blue in the face, but the consumer will eventually dictate the direction that things should take. And I think the consumer wants a more sustainable product. And I think the wine industry is giving that. So I think we're in a good space.
Which takes us, Takuan, into an area where sustainability and being business savvy, being commercially on the front foot, coincide. I think there was a time, rightly or wrongly, where the perception was we can try and be sustainable or we can be commercially successful, but not necessarily both. Again, I don't know if that was really the case, but it was often a perception. But now, being on the right side of the environmental challenge of farming the right way, of producing the right way, is not just the right thing to do, but it's also something that supports your business model, supports the way in which you can successfully be sustainable financially, and not just in terms of looking after the terroir from which your grapes emerge.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important thing. The key holder there is, it comes down to everything. It is actually money, because it is the key thing. Because as Johan said, it's in the reverse. If you don't have that, you can't fulfill. And if you don't start that project afterwards and say that this is what it costs honestly to produce good, honest grapes, then we got a problem. I mean, if the future youth want to have sustainable wines, they just have to know they have to pay more for it. It's just a simple balance in life of these three chairs, or one chair, one foot holding three chairs or something like that. You have to pay for it. And I think sustainability goes into a deeper one. But I'm very pleased to say, or to hear that, because at the end of the day, if some people have just got cash and it just goes off, but to run a proper business and to stay true to oneself, when it relies on price. And nothing, even if you're commercial, nothing in life is for free. So that kind of like wine is just, we can just open a tap and it flows. There's so many elements that make it extremely expensive. So those messages, if people want to live healthier, better lives, and also, sustainability is how many people can this planet hold? How much earth do we need for wine? How much do we drink a day? So it's a huge one. But money is the key, because it can relate back to that. If you don't have it, you can try blue in your face. It won't come to it won't be sustainable. I mean, I'm pleased that Johan broke it down like this, because when big companies come in that buy retailers, they throw in the sustainability, but the question is, okay, let's make this project work. Okay, so who's paying for it? The one that's asking for it, or the one that is trying to supply it? So we're slowly getting there, but it's a large equation, and there's so many key elements to it, and at the end of the day, it's the quality you can get out of it.
Sustainability is such a multifaceted space, which leads to the sustainability of the Haute Cabrière operation, which has seen some shuffling. You've juggled a few pieces, and I'm just having a look here at the 17-page press release I've received. You are now the Executive Global Emperor of Haute Cabrière for life. Is that the new role, Takuan?
At the end of the day, I'm Haute Cabrière. I'm the second generation that is following in my father's footsteps. I'm proud of it. We've got an amazing team. I haven't even read through 17 pages because I'm dyslexic. But humbly to say, I'm there to support it. I'm there to support wine. I'm there for strengthening the terminology of sustainability. I'm just actually Takuan von Arnim, doing the best I can. But what is important is we got a fantastic cellar master, a young gentleman that I sneaked in around 2014, and from day one, really kind of connected with Haute Cabrière and our philosophy of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Tim Hook, and has helped take my father's vision of Cape Classic and focusing on 2 main grape varieties to a new level, and he's getting the recommendation from it. And then, on my side, you can't juggle everything. You really can't juggle everything. This is also an entertainment business. It's a balanced business, and I've got the opportunity now to share more of Haute Cabrière to the world. 95% is sold responsibly in South Africa, so it creates a lot of job opportunities. Our wines are real. The other day I mentioned to someone, Chardonnay Pinot Noir allows you to be you. It doesn't put you into a corner and tells you what to do. That's why it's fallen into so many homes and so many people have fallen in love with it, because there's no, it doesn't make you question your ability to drink wine or enjoy wine. It's more there for sharing and having fun, like our Cape Classic that we're enjoying today. I mean, our Pierre Jourdan Brut started, my father walked into a bank in 81 and said, I bought a farm. And we're quite young. We're only what is it? How old is? Getting to maths. But from 81 to now, we've achieved a brand. I think what is important, what is critical, if you look at the sustainability thing, is putting back into your company, putting back into your people, putting back into your philosophy. And you might not be the first to get to the end of this perfect world of sustainability, but everything you put back into it with the aim and vision, that's critical.
Clarify then, just so going forward, you have your new cellar master. Give us a little bit of background there and how that changes things day to day for Haute Cabrière.
Well, for Haute Cabrière, there's definitely it's almost like adopting or having a new generation. Tim Hook joined us in 2014. Bear in mind, so it's no real big shift. It's just being able to acknowledge someone that's worked very hard. I'm there to come in and have the excitement and follow the evolution of our wines, which I have done. I created an amazing platform for Tim to be able to enjoy himself and play. My father, if you came up with him with an idea that was different to his, he was very focused. Where we allowed to be open-minded and expressive. That keeps the creative juices going to improve our blending. So no, in a sense, there's no massive change. I've still got a final touch on the wines, and there's Tim that's get the recognition for his hard work, and then I take that message to our customers and to the world. It's just refining it, as you would say. It's no massive, the Takuan have. I mean, I still got everything to do with it, but the acknowledgement and the structure is there.
And together it means more great wine coming out of Haute Cabrière for years to come, as it has been doing for some time now. And if you'd like to try that wine, you can this weekend at the Pick and Pay Wine and Food Festival, where both Haute Cabrière and Reyneke will be on show. Johan, you've got 4 wines that will be centered around your display at the festival on Saturday and Sunday at the Wanderers. I will be there. What am I drinking when I come and visit your stand?
So Dan, we've got a range of wines on the farm, different wines for different occasions. We've got the organic range. This is what they look like. So you can find these wines in Pick and Pay, and they are what I would describe as our Monday to Friday wines. They're not overly expensive. They're not cheap wines either. You can pay around about $100 a bottle, but you're going to get incredible value. You're going to get a wine that, it's fresh, it's live. You can buy it this afternoon and drink it tonight. We have other ranges as well, our biodynamic and reserve ranges, but they are a bit more serious wines that you want to take to a dinner party or perhaps even invest in as an investment going forward. Our hill, we live on a granite outcrop outside Stellenbosch, and it's got different aspects and different altitudes. So if you stand on the one side, you kind of look towards Stellenbosch. If you stand on the other, well, sort of halfway around the corner, you're going to look directly over False Bay. If you come around the corner, you're going to look in the direction of Table Mountain. And then you also have a difference in altitude of, I would say, between 100 and 300 meters above sea level. So what we found is that there are horses for courses, there are pockets where different grapes seem to perform better. What works for us on these granite soils would be, in terms of reds, would definitely be our Syrahs. And also in terms of Bordeaux varietals, we go for Cabs or Cabernet Francs, or maybe a bit of a Merlot blend in there as well. And then the whites would be Sauvignon Blanc and Chenin Blanc. So we're going to have all 4 cultivars of our organic range available, for people to taste. And hopefully they like them, and it'll give them a bit more confidence, and they can migrate up, spend a bit more, and get something a bit more special once they become familiar with the brand and a little bit more comfortable parting with their hard-earned cash.
And in terms of festivals like this weekend, where you get so much wine, it can often be a bit dizzying if you don't know the wine world. What should I try? What should I drink? One of your key points of difference is the driving of the organic, of the biodynamic, of the style of farming that you approach so wholeheartedly. Do you find that we're at a point now in South Africa where at an event like this weekend at the Pick n Pay Wine and Food Festival, you're expecting people to come up and ask, why is it called organic? Or is it really organic? Or how does that affect the wine? Is that a point of curiosity increasingly for South African wine drinkers, South African wine buyers?
It really depends, to be completely honest. There's a lot of diversity in opinion within the South African context and also globally. So globally, there are, some countries that really take to organic wines and the ethos behind it, and there are others who don't. And I find the same in the South African context. There are certain areas and certain groups of people who really appreciate organic wine and what it stands for. And then there are others who think, well, maybe they don't have the same longevity, or that they're of the same quality, or they're going to cost more than they should because they're organic. In essence, I'm a believer. I have been since 2000 when we started. I think, you showed some really top wines there. One that you didn't show was DRC, Romani Conti, which is arguably also one of the best wines in the world, and it's also been organic and biodynamic since the 50s. So there's a lot of education that needs to take place around what do organic wines entail, how are they different in the vineyards, and then we try and explain to people that instead of using herbicides and pesticides and fungicides, we don't do nothing. I don't think farmers use those products because they want to. They use them because they have to. And if you're not going to use them, you have to come up with a whole host of other creative solutions. So we do all kinds of things. We use companion planting in the vineyards. We do biomimicry with herds of cows in our vines. Like a whole host of stuff. I mean, it's not the platform that's to discuss it in depth, but I'm a phone call away for anyone who would be interested, or even better, if you can come to the farm and see for yourself. And then in the cellar, it's also you try and do wild yeast ferments and lower sulfite levels and things like that. But, ultimately, quality trumps everything. If the consumer has a glass and it blows their hair back, that's 90% of the battle won, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So we primarily trying to sell our wines as really good wines, and the fact that they're also organic and biodynamic is more a matter of personal preference. That's what I like to do when I get up every day.
Of course, it is easier to have your hair blown back by wine if, like Johan, you have perfectly bouncy, conditioned Jennifer Aniston-like hair. It's a little more different for some of the rest of us, but metaphorically, that's exactly what will happen if you tuck in to some of the Reyneke at the festival this weekend. You also have the chance to go bubble hunting, and this is going to be a packed area. It's a specific garden for bubbles at the festival. The brand sits within the Haute Cabrière stable, the Pierre Jourdan brand. I think you've got your Brut, you've got your Bar Rosé, you've got your Demi Sec. Give me a sense, Takuan, of what's striking a chord with South African bubbles drinkers at the moment, and what they can look forward to from your range this weekend.
Bubbles is very, very interesting. Everyone thinks it's quite simplistic, but like with wine, everyone's got their own preference. Aged, matured, brush, heavy or light, fruity. So it's truly in the eye of the beholder. I mean, one had to make bubbles quite exciting. So it's going to be difficult to coin this one. But my two big favorites are the Brut and the Belle Rose. The Brut is a blend of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Leading Chardonnay with Brut there, and minimum of 12 months on the lees. Lovely, fresh and racy, perfect with oysters. Gets it going before the espresso in the morning, or amazing for sundowners, oysters, you name it, as an aperitif. Then you got the Magnum. Doesn't really mean you got a drinking problem. You share that with two or one. You might have to be a bit mildly schizophrenic and say, in my case, tuck one or tuck two. But amazing wines. Then we got the Belle Rose. It's a 100% Pinot Noir, with a little bit more fruit, a little bit more structure. Those are more food wines. You can have, amazing canopies with it. Prawn cocktails. And the Brut, you can have a little bit of, beluga caviar, or a ton if you can afford it. But with the Belle Rose, it's definitely crayfish, seafood. It's got a little bit more substance to it. And Belle Nectar, interesting enough, even though I wouldn't be my first choice of the demi-secs. I'm talking demi-sec in total, but Haute Cabrière, we're all about balance, so we kind of saved it. For me, it's more of like a true dessert Cape Classic. You don't need the strawberries and whipped cream because it's all there. So it really has got a lovely freshness to it. And yeah, it'd be like a sorbet at the end of a great meal, because it really, for me, it's very important to prove the identity of the grape variety. Adding a little bit more dosage is quite easy. You don't really have to study to add sugar or keep sugar in wine. So it's, for us, it's really the creative side. And with our Belle Nectar, that's exactly what we wanted to do, is keep the balance, the identification of the wine. So if you want to round off with something a little bit more, with a little bit more substance, there's the opportunity for that.
Oh, there you go. There's some guidance on what to get started with and what to get finished with when you head through to the festival. There are still tickets available at Web Tickets to go and join a very enthusiastic crowd of wine drinkers. There'll be terrific food. There will also be a lot of music, and you'll be able to see me wandering around, crew in tow, drinking some wine, doing some filming, and enjoying wine like Reyneke and Haute Cabrière with a very big smile on my face. It's been a fascinating conversation with two great friends of Dan Really Likes Wine, ranging freewheelingly from bubbles to sustainability to some of the great wines we've collectively drunk, and all told just celebrating the wonders of wine in general and South African wine in particular. So guys, thank you. Johan, Takuan, much appreciated. Lovely having you both on the show. We'll be raising a glass to you both from the festival this weekend. And I think I've got my next drink ready before I head off to bed tonight, Takuan.
There we go.
Guys, thanks very much. Take care. We'll see you both again soon. Much appreciated.
What a pleasure. Thank you, Dan. Jan.
There we go.
Thanks,
Johan
guys.
Reyneke, as impossibly good looking as ever, as is Takuan, of course. Two great winemakers, great characters of South African wine, and some really interesting stuff there on all sorts of elements of the South African wine industry. If you are free, I'd love to see you this weekend. Come and join us at the Pick and Pay Wine and Food Festival. Before then, though, you can see us on Thursday, because on Thursday I will be back on the show with Michael Frijon, with Michael van der Venter from the Vinotech, and with Benny Howard, who's now with Mirandal, but has a long and glorious history in the South African wine industry, as we look at the tribute Chateau Libertas Magnums brought out in support of the memory and legacy of Dame Pete Bailey, one of the greats. Thanks for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed the show. See you again on Thursday. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.